want to tell you a story about a little friend of mine. Well, he wasn't really a friend. He was a groundhog. This groundhog decided that he wanted to live under the porch of the house. And right in front of the house was a beautiful perennial garden. It was my job to make all the flowers look nice. And it was the groundhog's job to dig them up. And so I would fill in his hole, and then he would dig another one. And so then he made a burrow, and he took some of the stones out from underneath the foundation of the porch and went under the porch, and we cemented up that hole, and he dug out from underneath the cement. He found his way back into the garden. So finally I went out and I bought one of those big cage traps called Have a Heart. Doesn't hurt the thing, but just catches them. Took that up and I put it right outside the hole of his burrow. And I came back the next morning, and guess what? There he was. He was not looking happy. I think maybe groundhogs are not born in a good mood. I think they're born in a grumpy mood. But he was definitely unhappy. I didn't want to hurt him any, so I put my heavy gloves on and I picked up the cage and I put it in the back of my pickup truck. And I drove up the road a couple of miles. I figured, leave him off in a wooded area, he's going to find a happy home that's not in the middle of my garden. And I put the cage on the ground and I very carefully lifted up the latch and opened that cage door, rolled it over so the cage door was wide open. But you know what? That groundhog, he wouldn't go out of the cage because he was so busy trying to get at me. He kept looking at it, so he put his nose and his teeth was biting on the wires of the cage, looking right at me. And there the door is wide open. And you know, I'm going to read a little story about somebody else who was in a cage. His name was Lazarus. It wasn't really a cage. He was buried. He was in the tomb. And I'm going to read a few verses to give you a little bit of the context of the situation. It says, and Jesus, deeply moved, again came to the tomb. There was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there'll be an odor, for he's been dead for 4 days. Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? And so they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the man who had died came out, his hands and face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Now, you and I, sometimes we're a lot like Lazarus and a lot like my friend, the groundhog. We're all bound up with regrets or shame or doubt or bitterness or unforgiveness. Jesus said, roll back that stone from the corner, from the front of the tomb. Just like I opened up the groundhog's cage, and I wanted him to be free. I wanted him to have a happy home. But he was so angry that he never saw the open door. Sometimes we're still angry at some people. Maybe they have let us down, or they have hurt us, or they have stolen from us, or whatever you can fill in the blank in your life. We've all got people like that in our lives at some point. But Jesus has come so that we could have a happier home. He doesn't want us in the middle of the perennial garden. He wants us in heaven with him. And the door is wide open. And even if we're wrapped up like Lazarus was all wrapped up. Imagine if Jesus had said, Lazarus, come out. And he didn't come out. He said, well, I'm all wrapped up. I'm supposed to stay here in the tomb. It wasn't easy for Lazarus to come out. He was all wrapped up like a mummy. You know, you see the movies, the Egyptian mummy, and it didn't say he burst all the things. He probably hobbled out of there trying to do his best. You see some prisoners where their feet are chained together and they take little tiny steps coming out of the courthouse. That's the way it was with Lazarus. He had to get his way out of the tomb. We got to make that decision. You know, I'm going to leave behind that issue. I'm going to forgive that person. I'm going to leave behind that issue with that things that didn't happen the way I hoped. There was a divorce, there was a death, there was a bankruptcy, there was a betrayal. But Jesus has a happy home for us. Jesus, he came out of a tomb also. On the third day when the stone rolled back, Jesus walked out of the tomb so that we can have hope that we can come out of that cage that maybe we're in today. Jesus came, gave his life so that we could be free. I'm going to take a little time to pray. You don't have to look at me or look around at anybody else, but this is Jesus' invitation for each of us. Take a moment and say, the door's wide open. What kind of cage are you running at?